Okay, I'm going to start. First of all, I'm Kerry. I'm a 5th year, and this is my process for whenever I make renderings or section perspectives, just how you take it from the computer to making it look a little bit better. So this is an example of an original rendering that comes out of the computer. In this case, I'm using Podium, but it works like V-Ray or Maxwell, and so this is what it looks like when it just comes out. And then this is what I'm going to show you how to do. This is after process with people, trees, a little bit of texture, and plants.
You kind of pause there.
Yeah.
You put down back up.
Definitely.
So guys, what's really nice about it, I mean, it almost looks like a drawing. We're not talking about photorealism here. We're talking about adding in character, like producing scale. Talking about, you know, softening the edges of things a little bit. So there's a lot of nice things happening, and also like lifting out some of the darker elements that happen from the rendering. So instead of rendering it again and playing with the settings, actually going in and just fixing it in Photoshop. Okay, it's really nice example. And you know, so again, not really photorealism, but you know, and again, kind of emphasizing the like line of things to kind of distinguish the shapes. All right. We're going to see that Lindsay's is a bit different, but this is a really nice kind of like painterly technique for this, okay? Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah. So first I'm going to start with the couple of things that I always use. These are some websites that I can give this to Nick, or you can write them down. And the first important thing that I always get is textures. And what I mean by that is a big image that you can use that's high quality. So if you need a concrete or you need a stone or you need a brick or something that you want to use to Photoshop in, I always go to cgtextures.com. And you have to sign up and make an account, but it's just an email and password, and then you log in. Have you ever gone there, Nick? Yeah. Let's pull that up really quick so I can show you what I'm talking about.
And the important thing is to get high resolution images.
Yes.
Because you can always make them smaller, but when you make them bigger, they get kind of blurry, they get pixelated, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's hard to find high resolution images.
And sometimes that makes the quality of a rendering. And you can use these too if you want to do a section perspective with an abstract kind of base. You can use one of these textures, something that's you can put on a large scale drawing and it doesn't get pixelated. So for example, this is what the website looks like. It's all in categories. I usually go to the concrete ones to get some basic textures, and then you have bare concrete, dirty concrete, and so forth.
257
yeah.
samples of bare concrete.
And so you go and these, so in bare, now there's all of these, and you click on one and it takes you, this is where you log in, but I'm not going to log in, but if I did, I already have this downloaded. I think you can get like 3,000 by 3,000 pixels, some of them up to 7,000 by 7,000.
It's like as big as your plot, basically.
Exactly, and so that when you're in Photoshop, you don't have to stretch it out, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. But this is a really handy website for all kinds of textures, glass, paper, plastics, and really just for use in Photoshop. And that's the first website. The second one is called allsilhouettes.com. Has anyone ever been to this site?
That's a new one for me.
Okay, this is more. Yes, I know.
Are you going to give us this PDF? Or
I'm going to give Nick this PDF.
I'll put it up on Moodle.
Yeah, you can write them down if you want, but he'll give them to you. This is just things that I've found after trying to make these images over all the years. These are the most reliable websites. And you can get silhouettes of anything. Look, disabled people. You can get disabled people silhouettes.
That's sexist.
Pole dancer silhouettes. We're not going to download this one.
Yeah.
However, this is something that if you have a...
why only 15?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's only so many poses.
I guess.
If the reason I use these is more so in a section perspective. If you're in your CAD drawing, you can get a DWG of these people, and they're scaled, so you can put 5'6" people in your drawing, and they're exactly right. They come in a couple different forms. I'll show you what it looks like. So if we wanted to download walking people side view, this website can be a little tricky because of the ads. You just have to know what to look for.
Yeah,
so there's going to be fake download buttons. Don't be fooled. Don't download that. Okay, and this is what the actual download button looks like right here.
Thank you.
That's it. Download free walking people side view. Can I download it, Nick?
Of course.
And this is more for if you want scaled people to put in. This is more for section perspective, but I want to show you how to use it because this site has tons and tons of them. You know, table lamps. All the table lamps you'd ever want. Pigeons.
The pigeons.
There's pigeons.
Be like a John Woo.
So I've actually already downloaded this. Okay. And what you'll get is a folder So this is the vector people I just downloaded. And so there's an Illustrator file,
Gosh.
EPS file. There's usually a DWG, but if not, you can open an Illustrator, save it as a DWG, pull it into AutoCAD, and they're typically scaled at people's height. So the kids will be the right kid height, and adults the right adult height. Sometimes not, double check it.
If not, that's easy to do.
Right. And so this is an EPS preview. Those are all the people you get, and you can take them out individually in CAD. You can make them gray, you can make them white, so forth. Okay, so that's one resource. That's the second one. And the third thing I wanted to talk about, as far as where I get my resources, is Photoshop brushes. Have any of you downloaded Photoshop brushes before? No. Well, it's basically the secret to everything I make in Photoshop. Don't tell anyone.
Just the internet.
There's not as much of a perfect Photoshop brush site that I've found for the silhouettes and the textures. This is one, but seriously, if you just Google people Photoshop brushes, the file type you're looking for is .abr.
Now, do you use brushes for like your foliage too, or?
Yes,
okay.
I do. So
because I use them for like when I do trees and grass.
Yes, yes. So I can show. I don't even know where I got all these. I literally just Google searched people brushes, tree brushes, and so this is the file that I downloaded. For example, right here, trees by Horahue, whoever that is, and usually if you double click it, it'll load it into Photoshop.
Okay.
Or let's go ahead and open a file. We'll just get started here, and it can definitely help you get those resources again. So I'm going to open this original rendering I started with. Where's your Photoshop? Okay, so this was the original out of the computer rendering I was talking about.
And Kerry, what's your size? Like, how big is this?
This is 28 inches by 21 inches.
At what DPI?
Well, I set it at 300, but out of Podium, it's typically 72. So
okay.
This isn't fantastic, but for this, it's readable for what size I'm printing it at, and that's what's key.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I just wanted you to say that explicitly.
Yes, definitely. So, how familiar is everyone with Photoshop? Have they used it a lot?
Somewhat.
A little bit.
It would be good to just go through the.
Okay. Well, the brush tool's what I was talking about, and if you pull down the brush menu up here, you can see all the different styles of brush you have. And since I double-clicked that tree ABR, I now have all these tree brushes.
Now, is that going to
see what that looks like?
Is that going to stay in your file permanently?
Yes, if you do it on your computer.
Uh-huh.
So I have trees and birds and people
Okay.
from years ago that I've downloaded. And if not, keep them in a folder or refind them.
Okay.
But you're not going to have to download these trees or load them in every time you open Photoshop. It should stay there. The other way to do this, do you see this little button here at the top of the brush? It brings out a menu and you can say load brushes. And from here, you have to go find that .abr file. And so I had a couple ones here. I had people and trees. Let's bring in the silhouettes. So I just brought in a bunch of people. And it works the same way. So this, basically you can paint with people and trees and birds and whatever you want. Okay, so the first thing I typically do when I'm starting these files is I add a texture over top of all of it to make it look less plastic. I think Lindsay used the word plastic. Sometimes when they come out, they just look like fake. So this is where I go and open one of those big textures. So I've downloaded a concrete texture from that website. I think it was pretty big.
You put the whole texture over the entire image.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. So this is the texture, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to drag it from this window into the next and plop it on top, and you can see it was as big as my rendering, which is very large. And then from this point, I mess with a couple of the settings in this Layers tab. So it's always set to normal when you have a layer, and I put these on Overlay. So it gives it a texture and it overlays it so you don't really see any of the color. And then from there, I take the opacity and I mess with it until it looks... So from there, it starts to look less plastic.
This is an old trick I used to do when I did renderings to make them look like they were like film grain.
Yeah.
I would just toss on.
Guys, I'm giving away all my secrets. This is all I do for all my renderings. It just makes it look a little bit more sexy. Is this bright enough? Okay. So you can leave that layer there. At the end, you might want to turn it up a little bit more or down.
That already does so much.
I know. If you just look at turning that on and off, it looks less fake. And you can play with a metal texture. I find the concrete ones are the most They're sort of less intrusive and just a little bit of texture.
It's not too random.
Yes.
Not too regular.
Right.
Yeah, that's a nice touch.
So I have a whole folder on my computer of textures that I use to overlay. And one fun thing to do is if you have a whole set of renderings, you can do the same type of overlay on all of them so they look like a consistent set that you did the same way. And this is what I start to do in these. So secondly, I change brightness and contrast because the renderings always come out darker than I would like. Usually crank the brightness up about 50.
Now this is, are you, now I
I'm
want to ask
on
you something about that. When you do that with the brightness, do you do the legacy command or the regular command? Because there's that checkbox for legacy. And it's actually slightly different. I don't know if that matters to you.
I've never seen that button.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because the old Photoshop, which is why they have like the legacy thing, it just brightens everything.
Oh, yeah.
The new one pays attention to the different levels in the image.
Yep.
And it doesn't brighten uniformly.
Okay. So I usually crank it up a decent amount. From Podium, these come out dark. And when you print on a lot of the plotters, they print a little bit darker than you intend. So I try to make my renderings as light and bright as possible and then try to get them to print as they would look good. So it looks maybe a little lighter than you would want it to as it's in here. And then I do levels, and I take the middle level, and I sometimes pull that up a little bit. And you have to go back and forth between brightness and contrast.
So you're increasing the brightness of the midtones.
Yes, because it has, these are little classrooms, and you see it's really dark on the inside. And so if I pull the levels the whole way up, they still stay dark. So at this point, I'm actually going to select those and lighten them by themselves. So I'm going to get the magic wand tool out, and that's over here. It's going to be on quick selection, and the other button is magic wand. And if you turn the tolerance up, it'll grab more of the image. So right now the tolerance is on 12, and it seems like that's okay.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
I'm grabbing a little bit of the wall.
A little bit of the wall. So, it's on 32. It's not on 12. That's why.
Oh.
So you can, and I mean, the bigger you're rendering, the more you want to be particular about how much you're actually grabbing. But just for the purpose of showing you what this does, I'm just going to grab these dark spots and then go back into levels and do the same thing, but it's going to just do what I'm selecting. So now it'll brighten those spots a little bit. And that's just to get rid of if you have like black holes or something came out way darker than everything else. It can start to equalize it a little bit. So you can see that next to the other one.
And that's way better than putting more lights in it or something, right? Or than putting in lighter glass or taking out the glass or any number of rendering fixes that you would apply. It's just faster.
Yes.
One thing that I don't know if you do this much, Kerry, but you're editing the background plate, like the actual.
Yeah.
I usually make a copy.
You can duplicate it. Yeah.
Yeah, just in case, because then you can always go back and you can always grab pieces of the old image.
Yeah. So before you even get started, if you just duplicate the background, you can even turn it off. It's not even there until you might want to use it for something else. Good. So, okay, after this, Nick, what is your feeling on skies?
I like them.
Okay. Sometimes you can choose not to put in a real sky or a fake sky or
it depends on
color.
If it's on a page with a lot of other things, the sky is going to create an edge on it, which I may not like.
Where's my render?
But at the same time, as if you have one, it does actually make it more of a box, which can help you with layout.
Right.
Oh, I like that. That's
so this is the final image I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
And for the sky, it's just a light blue. And since I have that concrete texture over everything, the sky even has a little bit more play in it. It's not just a gradient. It's such a cheat. It's such a cheat. Put the concrete over everything. I want to see a bunch of little Kerry renderings all over the school.
There's gotta be.
Okay, so to make a little sky, it's not a little sky. It's not cute. Okay, make a new layer. And as you're doing this, if you're going to do a really big file, go ahead and name this sky. Go ahead and call it what it is, because if you get to a lot of layers, it's going to be like, oh, where's my sky? I don't remember when that was. So again, the magic wand tool is your friend. And since the way Podium's renderings come out, the background is always pure white, so it's really easy to grab what actually is the sky. And so I'm actually going to grab the little windows in the tower too, and some of the extra white pieces here, so that it actually looks like a real background. So I did that on the background layer, and then on the sky layer, I'm just gonna use the gradient tool and go from a blue, and that doesn't have to be perfect. I picked a blue that's already in the file, and then it fades to white, or you can do fade to nothing. And then I just go from bottom to top, and it looks ridiculous. But then we go back and opacity, turn it down until it looks more like the color you're going for.
And then do you take a brush to just kind of soften the edge up a bit, or
yeah,
like an eraser or something? Or?
Well, the thing is, there's trees and stuff on top of it, and it starts to blend with the settings. But that's a really simple sky right there.
I mean, like you could take a brush that's like a sponge brush or something, right?
Yeah.
With an eraser and just kind of, so that it's not such a straight gradient, you just kind of like stumble the edge of it a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you show that one more time? So you pick the color.
Yeah.
On a layer, pick the color.
So I selected the white part first in my background image, and then on the sky layer, I did a gradient, and I picked a blue, and a decent blue for what I was looking for.
And the gradient builds based on, well, like one of them is built based on your foreground and background
Right.
color.
So up here, this is the gradient options. So right now it's setting from, I guess, the foreground to background color I have picked, but the one I usually use is the second one. It goes the color you've picked to nothing. So
the transparent.
The transparent, right. So you can, if you can actually do a couple layers over top of each other, and it doesn't overwrite it, so to speak. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's your basic sky. And what you could also do there is put in a JPEG. You'll show maybe an example where we actually use a real sky, but that's the more abstract one.
And I think your Maxwell skies guys, when you add in that concrete, will sort of take on that. So you might just use your Maxwell sky, if you have physical sky. Yeah. But this is good.
It gets the job done. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next thing I usually put in is trees to try to get the backdrop going. So I make a new layer called trees. And then this is where I already have loaded all those brushes. And so if you can see, these couple of rows are trees. There's some that are palm trees and stuff, but there's usually, I want to pick about 3 different kinds because it doesn't look good if you just make the same tree over and over again. If I see that, I'm going to be angry. Don't do that. Do you agree, Nick?
You actually have to do like a single click. If you hold down the mouse, you
can color with a tree.
With a tree.
Don't make it blue either.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next step is to change the color. And this is where we can add a little bit of speed. I could show you the trick I use to make it look a little varied. I usually go to the swatches and just pick 2 greens. And the X key, if you hit X on the computer, that's a shortcut to switch the colors.
Yep.
And that comes in really handy for when you're doing plants because then you can alternate colors really fast. And
so you select the swatch
and then hit X and hit your other swatch.
So you have a foreground and a background.
Right.
Swatch.
Yep. So the other way to do that is actually click on the foreground one and pick the color, but hitting X will change that. Does everyone see where that's switching at the bottom? Okay, so I like to try to make these, as quick and efficient.
You have kind of a light one and a dark one.
Yep, so we have a light one and a dark one. And then I know that these trees are going to be a background element anyway, so when I'm drawing, I'm going to turn the opacity down to begin with. Instead of, because a lot of times I'll draw it at full strength and then turn the layer opacity down. But I want the trees to bleed through each other a little bit anyway, so I think a 60% will work, and then I'll leave flow where it is. So I'm going to, again, make this row of background trees, and then I'm going to add a couple more foreground. So I'm going to start by selecting that white space again, so I know it's up in that background space.
So you're putting it on, okay, and then you're...
And then on the trees layer, that's not a pretty green. That's when you switch colors. Just start putting a couple...
and then
to set, and then if you hit X in between clicking, that's how it switches. We're talking about speed.
And then, guys, the other thing you can do to sort of change the size very, very fast is to use like the bracket keys.
Yeah.
You know that one, Kerry?
Like this. Sometimes it's We're built for speed, guys.
Exactly. You just
because you got
I'm learning a lot.
Crank out a lot of renderings.
This is the Bob Ross school of
This is the-
architectural learning.
These are happy
see
trees.
How the background ones have kind of a haze, you know, they're kind of, there's actually a foreground and a background even in what she's drawing here.
Yeah, so X changes, if X changes the color, so you can alternate really fast.
You're not supposed to learn anything.
I think mine's completely different.
I'll
so-
probably learn things from you. So that's like the background setting. Then I'll pick a slightly different kind of tree. And if you're, you can also use the scroll. Oh, this doesn't work. You can scroll when you're over top of this
Yeah, it
to
does like one
check it
pixel
out.
at a time.
That's really slow. Okay. So use the brackets.
You can change the settings for the sensitivity of all that, but that's kind of advanced.
Yeah. So this is, that's just the basic tree background. So
But
I've only
because you
used.
already have the opacity as you're painting it, you get that layering.
Yes.
It's really
And I've
nice.
only used 2 different tree brushes, but it doesn't look like they're all repeated, like the first thing I showed. And using 2 colors and different sizes,
Yep.
and you can get away with 2 different kinds of trees. Then you throw a couple anomalies in there. Make sure there's there's
And again,
one that's
this
a little
is- This
different.
is way better than going in and loading in a tree texture
Oh,
render
yeah.
and putting the trees, painstakingly in your model,
Yeah. So that's the background tree layer, and then I usually do another one where they start to come more down into the picture. And so for this, I'm on I'll call this trees 2 layer, and then just do the same thing and make sure they get a little bit bigger. Like these trees aren't scaled, but they're relative to what I'm doing. So they'll get bigger and bigger as I get closer to the foreground.
And it's just purely an eyeball.
Yeah, like that's ridiculous. So, have a couple in front of the building. That starts to make it actually look like they're, a little bit more realistic. And then after I have a tree layer done, can turn it down even further. So the opacity on the layer can start to move a little bit so that you can see the building through it. So you don't want the trees to cover up the whole building. They're not, they're not the main part. And then to blend a little bit more of the background up there, I'll put a couple, in front of the bus circle.
And it's good, what she's doing is really softening the edges again, right? So the edge of the building, the edge of the background, so just creating some visual sort of, what do you call it? Just sort of interference in there.
Yeah,
It's more natural that way.
exactly. You don't want to put in there. Okay, so that's Happy Trees lesson 101. That's what I do for everything. And it looks like it's a lot more work than it really is. If you pick 2 solid colors and a couple of tree brushes, you can make it look pretty nice.
You could go nuts.
And this was just really quick. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can make it look awesome. And you could use like 7 shades of green and make it look really natural.
10 trees.
10 trees.
And some of them are dead trees.
And you can download bushes and plants. Go all out.
Pigeons.
Pigeons, put the pigeons in there. And so their trees are kind of looking some of them are a little overbearing, so I'd probably take down the opacity even further or go in and maybe turn the hue or saturation down. So you can use this like another layer of the image. Okay, so, and for this project I'm doing right now, it is really natural site, so I'll probably end up putting tons of trees and plants. So this next part is another plants layer that I love. I want to make sure you have the brush. Okay, this is my all-time favorite Photoshop brush. It comes into all of my drawings that involve grass. Yes?
Awesome.
Who made that? It's the greatest thing on the
I think
planet.
it comes with Photoshop.
It comes.
with Photoshop.
Does everyone know the grass brush? Okay,
It's famous.
so it's this little guy right here, number 134, maybe? Whatever that is. It's like 3 little grass blades. I get way too excited about this. And
It's not possible.
when you use it, it does like different things.
Yeah, there's.
I don't
actually-
understand
there's
it.
actually settings, Kerry. Like how you're actually doing the different.
Yeah.
How you're doing the different colors and whatnot.
Yeah.
You can do random size and random color in the
Okay.
brush settings.
That's
actually.
awesome.
I didn't want to get into it, but that brush automatically
So
has
that one's, I think this one does it too, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like smart brushes.
So this
But
is,
you can make a tree brush that does this.
oh man, that's bad news. I'm
I
gonna be
know.
playing with this all day
I know.
long. Great. Okay, so this is for, I have little planter boxes down here that are they're just little gardens, and I don't want to explicitly put the real plants in there. So I use this to give it a grassy texture, and I'm just going to use these 2 colors in here that are already selected, or maybe maybe go darker green.
You can
or so
also
forth.
do kind of like a brown green.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of year too, guys. If it's
You can
like
make
winter,
it
right,
look
you
sweet.
could have some dead grass.
You could have dead grass. This is a little dead looking. But and I'm holding down shift as I do this, so I'm just going back and forth, and it stays in the box. more or less. Yeah, and it looks like more work
Just say
than
grass.
just say grass and it puts it on.
Grass.
Just like in Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
Computer.
And then what I did for the other rendering that you saw was I then switched this one on to a red and yellow, and I made it a little smaller. I'll just take down a notch. It makes it look more like flower bed like. That was not what I
You
did.
could do like kind of a spatter brush on the tips
Yep.
to kind of create like a wildflower.
You
kind of
could,
effect.
definitely. And I think this one, yeah, that's sweet. The plant package I downloaded has a couple of things like that. Like you could,
Tall grasses.
you know, if you want to make it look less random, you could put in a couple explicit, you know, like legit plants. You know, like that one's special for some reason. And so for my project, the gardens were a really important part, so I wanted to make sure that they stood out and that you could tell that those were not just grass beds, but that they had a little bit of plants and color, because at one point my renderings looked like a jail, and I was like, where's the
And
color?
This is a great place to add that in. Exactly.
Yeah. Give it some life
Some like ground cover.
in the plants.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is, I did it down here in the other rendering. I had another layer of plants near the water's edge because I had a SketchUp topo line. And there's a number of ways to fix that, but I just started to add a couple more plant layers to blend. And so that's a good way to go in between the harsh edges, because we're trying to soften everything a little bit. And so the last thing I do is add the people, and it works the same thing as the rest of them. It's just another brush I've loaded. If you want to get really specific, you can bring in those vector people and size them and put them in little places.
You can paste them in from
You can paste them in from Illustrator. But for this type of rendering, I typically would use people brush just as I did the tree brushes. So I'm gonna.
Kerry, are you doing another thing to get the lines on the buildings?
Yes, I am. I didn't tell you that. Sorry.
That's okay. No, I wanted, because I like that quite a bit.
Yep, they're on there.
You guys notice that? How it's almost pencil lines on there?
Yeah, that one looks better.
What's that about?
Okay, so let's do that right now before I forget again.
I think I know.
Okay, so can I open SketchUp? Is it gonna?
It should be fun.
Well, okay, I don't need to open it. I mean,
you're going to show us something in Podium?
I had a scene in SketchUp that was right here, and I did the rendering, and then I exported this image from SketchUp.
Okay.
And this is all the color turned off, and it's just the lines and shadows. And what you could also do in SketchUp is you can export another image from this that is just color. You turn off edges, turn off lines, turn off shadow. So you can essentially do the same thing without even having to render if you just want to do a quick image and export 2 JPEGs and then overlay them. And what I did was I made sure that, for example, this rendering came out at 2048 pixels. And so when I exported this SketchUp JPEG, I made it 2048 pixels wide. So
Yeah, so they just line up with each other.
yes, they do. So I dropped this one into Photoshop. I should have done this in the beginning, but this is, sometimes I don't add the lines, it keeps it softer, but in this case it looked a lot better.
Yeah, I think it helps.
Yeah, so this, I do the same thing with the concrete. I take it and drag it into the rendering window and put it on top. And so it's another layer here, and it's set to normal, but I'm going to put it on multiply, and that makes everything that's black show through and everything that's white disappear. And so this is, it's the right height, so it's sort of snaps to the height, and then I just have to, tab left and right until it lines up. And
guys, you can do this with Mate 2D with Rhino.
Yeah.
Same diff.
And if you keep the lines as they are right now, it looks like a little much. So as everything, take it down in opacity.
You might be able to even throw on like a sketch filter or something on that layer.
Yeah, you
know,
could.
SketchUp, you could.
Well, no, I mean, yeah,
Oh,
I mean, in Photoshop, there are those filters that you can add onto things. You could do like an artistic sketch layer or something.
Where is that?
That is Sketch.
Or sketch layer, yeah, sketch.
Oh, it's not artistic.
Yeah, Mate 2D.
And then
Do
What's pretty?
Mate 2D makes the graphic ones.
I don't use these.
Graphic pen or something, or I mean,
Wow.
well, you've got the colors that I think set.
Sweet.
But if you do
But
it,
yeah.
do it as black and white. I think if you hit like H or something, I think it's gonna sets your. I mean, it's gonna use your foreground and background color. Yeah, so choose in black and white. I think there's actually a command that does it. I think it's like H or something. Yeah. There's one. There's something that resets.
Okay,
black and
well,
white.
you guys
You
come.
just hit the black and white thing. And
There it
that's
is.
that.
I was like, there's a
That's
button somewhere.
Oh, that's no fun. Okay.
Someone must have thought of that.
Okay, and then just as a graphic painting.
Let's check that out.
Yeah, it gives you a bit of this slightly sketchier. So you take your drafted lines, like your kind of quality lines, and you just kind of,
Look at that. It looks like colored pencil.
sketchifies them. Yeah. Neat.
So what I'm doing here, I do this on each of the layers. Instead of click this, I like shortcuts a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of clicking opacity and dragging the bar, if you're just on the layer and you hit the numbers 1 through 0, that goes 10%, 20%, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so forth. And 0 is 100. So I'm just hitting the numbers to check out that opacity. And that's a really fast way to go between different opacities and see if you like it or not. All about speed.
That really helps in terms of your window mullions. And
Yes, and now you can
interiors
see
of
the inside of the classrooms.
Yeah,
I
that's a
thought I'd
tremendous
put that on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, it's basically the rendering and then the line image and then the texture are your key components, and then everything else is added back on top.
That's not bad at all. Like, that doesn't take that long to do.
No, it's really quick. And then the last thing is people, and this is the last thing I'll show you guys. It's exact same as what I was doing with the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And for this one, I would want to download a set of kids because I'm doing an elementary school. But it works the same. And what I typically do is I see the person and I try to figure out, instead of putting the person here and getting their perfect scale, I look at this person and see where they could go that's right to what scale they're at. And then I like to put them in white if it's a darker rendering. If it was a super bright rendering, I would probably put the people in black. And then you can, I'll show you a way to toggle back and forth between that, but just get a couple different types of people. Again, you don't want the same one everywhere. I think I have a little girl here. They might be up at the water's edge.
Oh, no,
And then back
one way,
here-
guys, to kind of establish scale is to start on something like where you have the back over there, which is just a doorway, right? And you can scale them based on that doorway.
Right, so I know that this part of my building is, 5'6" at a certain line, and then I'll make sure that they're at that line. So that's a pretty. I'm using the brackets. I'm gonna put one right here. That's not appropriate. They're gonna drown. Some kids crawling around. That's a huge baby.
Like
Parents
Godzilla.
crawling on hills.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I like the look of the white people, but if you want to check it out as black, do Apple I, and that's invert, and you can just look at them really quickly. And
You can
so,
always fade them too slightly so they're
Right.
like shadows.
yeah, you could do either way.
Ghosts.
So,
Holy shit.
yeah, it's
That's the
flashy.
trick, though. Like, knowing how to use the arrow keys. Knowing how to use the keys rather than finding the icons
Yeah.
is a huge
I-
speed increase.
Sorry if it's been hard to follow me. I rarely click on these buttons. Everything has a shortcut, and if you learn them, it's so helpful. And if you hover over brush, it says B. That's it tells you exactly what it is,
Yeah.
and like the X, switching back and forth between the colors is really helpful.
Yeah.
Gonna put on a solar flare.
You don't think of it, but in the amount of time it takes you to actually find something and actually choose it is a few seconds. But then how many times do you use it and
Yeah.
then think that's like days that
Right.
you're using it.
So that was a really quick example of how to get from rendering to drawing. I have, or to a nicer image. There's a couple more examples of
Yeah.
what I've used that with. This is just a Sketchup Jpeg here in the middle with that concrete texture, and then faded to 30%. That's one thing you can do to show a quick axon.
These are
This
great
is
layouts,
how.
too, by
Thank
the way.
you. This is how I do my sections and plans. It's a CAD poche drawing.
Can you zoom in on
Yeah.
those just to get because it's
Yeah.
the
I might freeze for a second.
yeah these are enormous.
These are what you see in the background are, so like for instance this tower, the insides of these classrooms, that's a JPEG exported from SketchUp when I'm on a section cut. And then I line it up with the poche, and then in this case I actually used those scaled vectors that I was telling you about. And so they are
Oh, yeah.
pristine quality, and this is a draft image, that's why it's not lined up perfectly. But so I downloaded a set of kids' playing, or kids in a gym, and put that appropriately. So if you want to do section perspectives in this way, it's just really can you see those trees? I can see them on here. Really light trees in the background again, just to ground it and give it a sense of context. And if you're in a really urban site, or if you have other context, I have another idea for that. Same thing with the plans. I have a rendering.
Are you just doing those in SketchUp, or is there CAD? Starting CAD?
Everything black is CAD. So the poche is CAD lines that were actually, these were all exported from SketchUp, and then I composed them. I probably should be using something else by now, but this is my methodology, and this is how I produce things. And so the plan has the same kind of underlay with texture. And then as far as putting other context, for my elevations, I've collaged in pictures of the site. You can't see them that well over there, but I think the key to this is keeping this really light in the background to give a sense that something's back there, but not overwhelm the whole picture.
Yeah, because the important thing is what you are designing and what you're making. This will show up better in the video, guys. It's just not on the overhead projector.
And so this is an example of a SketchUp JPEG with CAD lines over top of it. And I mean, this stuff is just as quick as what I just showed you. Yeah. Really quick trees. People were already in the CAD drawing, and I don't even know if I threw my concrete texture on these. I might have been feeling a little crazy that day.
There's nothing in this though, guys, and I think that Kerry would second this, that is specific to SketchUp.
Yeah,
you can certainly export a screenshot out of Rhino or a quick Rhino rendering or Maxwell rendering or whatever. I mean, the principle is the same.
And this is the last image of another JPEG that was collaged in real people and pictures from the site, just to get an interior view. So that's a different take on it, but still using layers and trees and different types of things. Just depends on what feel you're going for. So,
but the textures, there are still textures on those beams and on the wall.
You can see my concrete. That's my concrete texture.
But is that applied in SketchUp, or did you do
in
it in
SketchUp?
Okay, so that's
in Photoshop.
In Photoshop.
Yep.
So you did like a selection and then you rotated it and scaled it.
Yep.
Okay.
So you can, that's another thing. From CG textures, I actually bring a lot of those into SketchUp and make my own paint bucket swatches from good texture, so that when your renderings come out, they've already got nicer texture to them.
Yeah.
And that's it. This is all that you have. This PDF, Nick, the websites that I use. And there's plenty out there, but I found these to be pretty reliable.
Great.
Yeah. Yes.
I liked the boards that you did, the one you were showing. You did it in Photoshop, and then the CAD doesn't raster in Photoshop.
Okay, so you really want to know all my secrets, don't you?
I'm
just kidding.
Every time I draw a straight line,
I don't bring my lines into Photoshop.
Okay.
When I do these, this is all in InDesign, and there's two files in InDesign on top of each other. The highest layer in InDesign is a PDF that I took from Vectorworks, which is the poche. Mm-hmm. Underneath that is my Photoshop trees and people, and I line that up.
You can use like an Illustrator too. It's the same. It's the same principle.
Same exact thing. But in InDesign, you can put it on multiply. You can put your poche layer on multiply so that it just goes right through and sits on top of your rendered section or whatever it is. And so all these are in the InDesign with two layers of lines and then texture.
Okay.
And then you have the labels and things.
And then the labels are already there. And the nice thing is, if you go in and add more trees and people, your InDesign will update, and you don't have to reline them up.
If you have a linked file.
If you have, absolutely.
Yeah. Of course you would.
But this is how I produce all of my drawings.
Sweet.
Yep.
That's a gift. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very nice.
Right. Lindsay.
I'm ready. I guess we'll save it. This is actually a rendering I'm using for my final, so we're gonna go ahead and save it.
Might as well do your work in
Might as well.
Right?
If we're gonna be doing it.
Excellent.
Go download some pole dancing vectors. Check them out.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you gonna stay around?
Yeah, I might learn something.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I learned a lot from her. Golly. I did not know that. Okay, she's the shortcut queen. I'm like the long way. But I really like the way hers turn out, and I like the way mine turn out too. So I guess I'll start off by showing you my websites too. The first one is like my absolute favorite. Oops. Digitalcutout.com, and it's like like I use real people a lot. I hardly ever use the
You don't use silhouettes.
silhouettes. I mean, sometimes in like sections or elevations, I won't use real people, but in renderers at least. So here they have people, and I mean, they're already white background, everything. You just copy, paste. Yeah, people,
And
plants.
these are all like free, like Creative Commons assets. Cool.
Everything. So, and I get everything from online. I don't use brushes, except for the grass brush. I do use that. I use that, and I use the eraser. That's what I use basically. So Digital Cutouts by onyx.com is the same kind of deal. They have vector people as well. You just have to go to, downloads. Cut out people, cut out trees. They have everything too. And then CG Textures is a good one. I also use Subtle Patterns, just for things like plans or something. If you want to put a pattern over like concrete or something that she does, the same, similar sort of deal. They're really subtle. Like they're not going to show up on the projector at all. But
They're subtle.
that's the point. So yeah, they're good to use as well. So then I guess I'm just going to go to my website to show you some examples. I don't even know if this is going to get me there. No. So this is, I use very, very basic Rhino renders and change it into like this or these kind of things. So, or I'll use hand-drawn and watercolored sections and renders to change them into like that. So, and I have it on big too if we need to see it. So let's see here. This one is a mixture of Maxwell Render and watercolor. These are really big, so I
Might open in Photoshop.
yeah, I thought I had a JPEG. There we go. So yeah, like I Maxwell rendered it, then I photoshopped it, put people and exterior plants and stuff. And I printed it on watercolor paper and then watercolored some sky and just some more textures over it. And then this is the one I'll be talking mainly about because I do really similar renderings to her to Kerry. I just most of the time use real people and real plants and stuff that I found online. So yeah.
I was mentioning before when I was talking to Kerry, you guys see these renderings that are in magazines, these like really realistic buildings and everything. It's like exactly the way it would be built. You really can't afford to do that in school. Like those people, the ones who made those renderings, that's their full-time job. Like that's all they do, and it takes them forever. It's a painstaking process. What we're showing you guys, like these are great. This gets the idea of the building across. They don't just look. I mean, your building isn't real anyway, so why try to make it like real?
Yeah, they look stagnant and
They're quick.
Well,
you guys don't have time,
Yeah.
So these are great.
So I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I made these groups last night. Normally my Photoshop file is really disgusting. I'm just trying to make it look all organized. I made the groups with people and landscape. So basically, if you turn all this off, this is what I get out of Maxwell.
Is that with the lens flare?
Yeah, actually, maybe not. No, I put the lens flare right on this layer.
Okay, you guys, lens flare.
Yeah, I'll show you the lens flare. It's like one of my favorite.
Don't show them lens flare.
Don't.
No.
I know. Okay. All right. Never mind. So.
It's hard.
It's like a corny.
Unseemly.
It can look really corny.
Unless
Yeah.
you're J.J. Abrams, there's no need for.
Yours is just like a little.
Yeah,
Lindsay
I try not to
Lindsay's
do them a
okay.
lot, but I do like them sometimes.
They can be reused.
So I start with the background always. I start with sky, and I use a real sky always, and most of the time pictures from the site. So this was that huge tower.
Oh, yeah.
This is on UNCC's campus. Well, supposed to be. Looks really.
Now, when you see real
Idealistic.
sky, is it a sky texture or a
It
photograph
is
of
a
sky?
photograph of sky. I
Okay.
go on Google and Google sky,
Gotcha.
and I bring it in, and I can show you how I do that. You don't have hot corners.
Do I wonder?
I don't know how to do.
I don't know how to so.
It's okay.
How do you get anything done?
I know. I like literally do this. Any sky. I mean, obviously pick one that's good. I'm just gonna pick one for now. And I like copy and then paste. Oh, gosh, I cannot do this. I copy and paste. You're probably not supposed to do that either.
You
But
can kill my windows. I'm in the middle of.
you are
coding something.
crazy. I don't even know where to find Photoshop again.
It's on the bottom.
Just hover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was
Oh.
gonna say,
Don't click. Sorry. So you paste it in, and then I work a lot with this filter over here. I do a lot of that, and so I will multiply. I will overlay, soft light. I have tons and tons of layers, so I copy and then kind of do this sort of deal. Not like that. That's really bright, but like.
So you actually mix them together.
I mix them together. I make like 50, not 50, but a lot of layers of that. And then I use basically the eraser tool is like my best friend. I bump up the size of it, and you have a soft edge, so it won't, be ugly. And then you can change the opacity down to whatever, and it just takes part of it away. You can't really, it doesn't show a lot, but some of it.
But again, you kind of build up, just a more subtle transition. And yeah.
So, oops, that's what I did with all of these. So you can see like this was the picture that I used. This was, I don't know, a tree. Where is my
So
sky?
you layer them off first, and then you just start messing around with the eraser tool.
Mhm.
Do you know which layer you're on, or you just kind of mess around?
No, I know what layer I'm on normally.
I mean, there's still an idea of things that are in foreground and things that are in the background. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the trees are in front of the building,
Right.
Yeah.
and then the sky is behind that. So
Yeah, I always start with the sky. So like I normally keep it all on one like kind of layer too, so you can see like this is all one layer of sky that I just cut and kind of pasted and shifted, so it's not one whole line across or it's not anything. And I use the eraser tool to soften the edges. And I mean it's so
it's
simple,
like
but
layer transparency,
Mhm.
layer effects,
Mhm.
different opacities, and eraser tool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just layering the complexity.
I know I don't have like a really systematic way like Kerry does. So if you can't follow along, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, this is actually more. This is more like the way I'm used to.
Yeah.
Using it. Yeah, definitely.
And so then this is still the background. I work with like, this is a picture of the site again, and the same sort of deal. I brought it in, I erased around here where the building was, where I didn't want it, and let it kind of sit behind that Maxwell render and soften the edges. And I layered this copy multiply over a color burn, and that's how I do it. Like you can see it there. And then once I've got the background where I like it, I move forward to the landscape in the foreground. I like having a lot of things that are like, that create this kind of scale and create, I don't know, emotional like moments around, I don't know. So like I like having big kind of elements right up front so you can kind of get that depth. So the landscape is, I literally Google trees, or I use digital cutouts, and I Google grass, and I will bring it in and then skew it with transform. I'll use distort perspective and all these little things to kind of change it.
Can you just show us really quick?
Yeah.
They may not.
Yeah.
May not know that.
My gosh. I mean, you can use like her websites or the texture ones. You can do all different ways, but I mostly just do it like this. I'll just find a kind of scale or texture that I'm looking for.
It's good to make a folder of all these things that
Yeah.
Yeah, I
you're
was just gonna
using, and make
say.
sure you make a library for
You probably
yourself.
don't do this every time you
Yeah.
open up a new.
No,
file. I would
no.
hope
So you
so.
have the trees that you want to use, you have the grass that you want to use, and the people,
Yeah.
like your whole entourage.
You save it. I mean, yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm pretty bad at sometimes just like copying and pasting and not saving it somewhere. So don't do that. But I don't even know where this is. Like this. There it is. So you bring it in, and then whatever, place it where you want, make it bigger or smaller, and then you can edit, transform, and perspective will kind of, I mean, obviously this looks rough, so we'll fix it. But like,
yeah, but again, it doesn't have to be great because you're going to be layering it and changing the transparency. And
Yeah.
You're gonna be erasing it. Like, yeah, it doesn't have to be. Yeah. I mean,
so I mean, already that looks
Yeah.
better, and so
Yeah.
then you can like I like layer it and multiply it,
and
blah
you make
blah.
copies of it and
Make-
layer them on top of each other.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really nice. This is, I mean, it's very Bob Ross.
Love it.
And then
palette knife.
yeah, like I'll soften this so
Yeah.
you won't see this so
And,
much.
it's like it's in some places it's kind of like on top of the path. And
Mhm.
it just doesn't. Yeah.
So I mean, already like that is a lot better, and I like the bringing in different vegetation. So oops. Let's see here. I mean, I'm not really organized. I feel bad because sometimes it can get crazy, but like just again showing that depth and that scale. I like bring in. I will look like for grass reeds or something like, and then like she said, just save them somewhere and you'll have them forever. And I mean, you can see there's just so many different layers. Like I do it until it looks right to me. And paths and textures I just get online as well. So, and then trees, the same sort of deal. I will bring them in and, erase where I want to not show.
But that one website already has the trees kind of cut out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not much. Like, so that doesn't even, like, do much. But, like,
Looks good.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Don't know what else. Let's see. And then people, so I do the trees, and then I do people last, like Kerry. And people are, I always kind of keep them realistic looking. I like to have them a little bit transparency so you could still see around them and through them. And I like to apply a blur to them mostly. So this lady,
Is it just like a Gaussian blur? Or
yeah,
what's the-
I'll show you. Yeah, so this lady is like, that's the normal, this is the bottom layer of her. And then when I make another layer of her and then make her blur. So I just go to filter and then blur, and then I do motion blur.
Emotion.
Mm-hmm. And you can set how much you want it, or like which way she should be moving if she's coming, that way. And you can make it really blurry or not hardly blurry at all.
If you blur it too far, she doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And then this one's just normal with the opacity changed down to
So
20.
you actually have one that's kind of normal with a low opacity and then a blurred one on top. So you kind of fix her in one location. So you can maybe add blur. That's nice.
Yeah. And I do it to almost all of them. So you can like zoom in and see.
Even the ones in the way back.
Even the ones in the way back. It gets grainy, but yeah, they have a blur.
And that's another interesting thing too about this rendering is that the rendering of the building itself doesn't take up a lot of the page, right? It's actually like a third of it. I don't know, a quarter of it. The detail on it's not like there's a lot of detail in all these things, but
yeah.
I mean it's not like this magazine rendering. But when you add in all the other details, your eye bounces around, and it's really just about the scale of the building and like where it sits and the kind of loose materiality of it. Like, I mean. I hope you guys are understanding with these two demos here. These when you see these things on the boards, they just seem kind of like monolithic, and it's like, oh my god, how do they do that? Like, how did this thing just come out? And it's really like Bob Ross. It's like this loose kind of steps that just kind of add on top of each other. There isn't really a lot of like discipline. It's your mind fills in all of the spaces in between.
Yeah.
The end result is great. I mean, but when you take it apart piece by piece, there's nothing that's that difficult about any of the steps.
No.
I mean, it's a great metaphor for what we're doing in this class. I mean, it's like trying to, demystify all these different processes.
Yeah.
These are great.
So this one, I relied kind of heavily on the Maxwell on this one because I really wanted these shadows to show from these mullions and these
Yeah, so
the
a lot
fins.
of this is actually out of the render itself.
Yeah, a lot of this. And then I use the same people. Like that's the same girl from the beginning. So you could just copy and paste her in there. This girl sitting on this bench, I got from online. I didn't, if you get something with background, it's not hard to use the magic wand tool, select that background and delete it out of there, And then of course, once you do that, I like to use the smudge or blur tool around the edges to make it less, let's see if I can show you, less jagged. So like you get in here and
Lindsay,
I don't
is
know.
this a scan of your watercolor paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Xscan. But like, let's say you had something else that you, so this is jagged edge or whatever. I don't know. Y'all can barely see that. Sorry. But you use the kind of this blur or smudge tool to, and knock the strength down to kind of make it softer. I don't know if you can even see it doing anything, but it'll just make, you know, I do that to a lot of the people if I have to cut them out, actually, and they come in.
Yeah, because the edges come in hard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that, and that tool and the eraser tool is really my go-to thing. I don't do a lot of the brushes, but those are really good to know. Like, get out of there.
Yeah, there's kind of like there's an additive process, you know, that we saw like with Kerry. So you just kind of, I mean, and with yours I suppose too. But then there's also sort of like subtractive, where you just kind of pull things down, blur them, smudge them, you know, selectively erase things. I mean, it's but it's really about the layering in all these cases. It's not just about what pops out. It's
Yeah.
I mean, you could do this watercolor. I mean, without putting on the watercolor paper by adding this is the concrete texture. You know? And actually, the texture does a good job of actually smoothing out some of the roughness of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so my renders, I mean, like, I put a lot of time into this one, but normally I don't put a lot of time into my Rhino renders. Sorry, Nick.
No.
But I don't even know. Like, so this Rhino render was terrible. I mean, like, this is not my best render either, but, like, I mean, this is from the Highline. Like, that's probably terrible to do. But but I needed a path that looked natural. And this, you know, I mean, this is really no material on a Rhino render at all, and I just, you know, made it a glass kind of, this is supposed to be an algae facade, so whatever.
Not a long time. Like, how long do you think it took you?
To this, well, the Rhino model itself, not very long. Like, I just would make the masses, and I leave them as gray, like, unless, you know, I know I'm going to need to quick select something in the future, so I'll change the color so it'll be easier to select in Photoshop. The Rhino model not long itself. The Photoshop, I take a long time just because I'm very particular, but I think, I mean, once you have all this stuff in a folder, it's like so much easier to kind of, and you have all these people that I can reuse, like, you know, it's easier to put them in there and then erase, you know, you use that eraser tool. See, I use lens flare again. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Go ahead. I'm trying to see. So, I mean, this was watercolor and hand drawing, and I just put people in there. Like, I don't.
I'm gonna post.
Yeah, this one was less.
I mean, there are some schools of thought. You know, there are some architects that'll print out their digital renderings and then they'll like draw on top of them, or they'll trace something and then they'll layer it on in Photoshop in the way that we saw the lines out of the SketchUp file from Kerry's. You know, so instead of the SketchUp lines, they're hand drawn lines. You know? In Michigan, we used to use like Made 2D in the same way.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
get lines out of like Rhino and like put them in there.
Yeah, and I don't do that often. I really should, though, because that could be nice, especially like in moments where the Rhino model will like disappear. And like I work really hard on the Rhino model, but then I like Photoshop all over it, so you can barely tell.
But again, it's like not about creating a realistic
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
You're never, I mean, really, realistically, not going to be able to do it. But it's really about the feeling of the space, like you said, about the kind of like emotional quality of it. Like how is it being used? Like this is a thing.
So, yeah, what are you trying to convey?
We're so busy trying to take people out of our buildings that we forget to put them back in again. You know, like you need to show that it's actually a space, and that's what that does. That your orthographics like don't really do.
Yeah.
That your diagrams like don't really do. Like these are the kind of phenomenological, experiential pieces. You know?
Yep.
So.
They're fun.
Yeah, they're fun too.
I love doing
your
this
reward.
part. This is like my favorite part.
Yeah, they're fun too.
So, I mean, I don't know if you have any more questions, Nick, because I know mine was a little less.
No, this is
I
great. I
just
like
went
seeing
to
both
it.
versions of this. I think this is again like destabilizing this notion of that there's only one way to do it, and it has to look precise. You know.
Yeah.
And I hardly ever have like a hard edge anywhere because when I put it on the board, I don't want them to look like they were just like photographs. I want them to kind of just pop out and be organic almost. That's, you know, that sounds
You
cheesy.
could take, when you're done with this, you could flatten it and then take a brush
Yeah.
and just kind of scumble the edges away. So it's not, here it's kind of, you can tell where the edges and
Yeah.
where the layers are, which I don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cool.
which I kind of like. It's actually kind of like a photo collage.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to, you could just soften it up like afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. I'm really happy to see both styles. I think this is really useful. Do you guys have questions for them?
I think it was cool seeing like one person who you put in the entire like landscape, and then she had landscape that she had brought in. From
Yeah.
the Sketchup model.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It was nice.
So yeah, I didn't have any green at
Oh,
all.
yeah,
It was
that's
just
green.
it's like literally whatever came out of Rhino. I just made it work.
No sky,
No.
no people. None of these other elements
No.
you see. And I see a lot of students spending a lot of time, spending a lot of time like adding in all these other like elements when you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just do them in the render.
Yeah, I did have materials on the fins and on the actual model itself.
Yeah. I mean the model itself, but I mean look at that. That's just the model in space.
Yeah.
I think though that I do like to do the site digitally because if there's any kind of like features in terms of
Yeah,
the
like
land,
this pond. This
and I
is
think in Kerry's it's really
Yeah,
important.
mine was about the gardens in front of it, so I
Mhm.
had to model them, but they looked just like these
Yeah.
flat planes in the rendering. There's nothing I could really do about that rendering to fix it other than to make it look more like a garden in Photoshop.
And it helps you know like where the water is,
Yeah.
like those kinds of things. I'm kind of lazy. I just want that as an underlay, But
Yeah.
but both of these, I mean, what's really important here is the building, and you kind of situated it on the campus, and I think that's really what's necessary. So yeah, these are really excellent. Thank you guys.
Fire.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Can you give
good
them?
job.
You got-